So I want you to think about your favorite food. So for example, mine is pizza. Now, when is the last time you ate this food? And what happened to it right after you ate it? Like, what happened beyond the process of chewing it? You probably didn't think about this. Now, before we actually go and explain what happened to that pizza or that burger or that cake or whatever, let's just label what's going on here to make sure we're all on track. Now, where's the mouth? Now, if you don't know this, you should be worried because this is the first place your food goes. But still, they want you to know how to label it. How about esophagus? Wait one sec here. So the esophagus, if you don't know what this is, it's basically a pipe connected to your mouth that carries the food that you just ate down towards your stomach. Okay, so it's just a long tube, a pipe. Don't worry about the function yet because we're going to get to that later. Okay, how about the stomach? So if you're ever confused about where the stomach is, just find the esophagus. Like first find your mouth, find the pipe attached to your mouth, and then the place where this pipe will lead is your stomach, because it's carrying your food towards your stomach to be digested. Okay, last one here, tongue. So that's the red part right there. And basically, just the only use of your tongue is to basically move your food around in your mouth so that you can digest it more easily. That's it. Because without the tongue, imagine you'd have to shake your head around to move the food side to side, right? So that's kind of the purpose of your tongue. Okay, one more thing. Oh yeah, last one. So salivary gland. Let's put this right here. So this is one that, okay, most people probably don't know if they haven't studied this before, because it's not a common thing. So the salivary gland is like, there's three of them here. So there's three types of salivary glands. As you learn more about anatomy and biology, you'll learn that the different names of these. But you can see there's one situated pretty high and then two kind of below the tongue area. And we'll talk about what these do later, what this does later. That's very important. So if you understand all these labeling, what I'm going to explain shortly will probably go pretty easily for you. Some key concepts that we first have to do as well is these three words. It's annoying because teachers always use these words, and in reality they have such a simple meaning, but if you've never heard of them, you will have no idea. So let's just think about it first. Alimentary canal, one of the first keywords. In your opinion, what would the alimentary canal be? So alimentary means kind of like food. It's another way of saying food. So the food canal. So you can think the alimentary canal is all the way from your mouth down through the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and out your anus. So it's basically, it's this entire canal. It's one pipe. It's all connected. It just starts looking different. But in reality, if you follow this pipe all the way down, it would come out your anus. So that's the alimentary canal. It's your food canal, in other words. What does digestion mean? So if you think of the word digestion, you probably think breaking down food or something like that. Like the process of breaking down food after you ate it. You say like, my food is still digesting after you eat it. And what that just means is your food is still being broken down inside your stomach and your intestine and all that stuff. That's digestion, the breakdown of a big thing to a small thing. A breakdown of your big pizza into something you can't even see that your body will use. That's digestion. So last one here is peristalsis. This one you don't have to worry about too much right now because in the next video I'll talk about this in detail. But for now, peristalsis is the process by which your esophagus moves the food down to your stomach. So it's a sort of muscular contraction that moves your food down because this pipe is so thin and tight that your food will just get stuck if the esophagus doesn't do something. Because like say you break down your pizza into some pieces and try and eat it, if this esophagus didn't do peristalsis, your food would just be stuck right there and you wouldn't be able to bring it down to your stomach. So peristalsis is really important, but we'll talk more about it later. Okay, so now let's finally get to this part. What happens to your pizza? So it's important to know that your pizza or any kind of food that you eat is made up of many, many, many important things. And those important things is broken down into 3 categories. Category 1 is carbs. This pizza is made up of some carbs, the bread, all those kind of things. Like bread is an example of carbs here. In addition, it is also made of some protein, the pepperoni or salami here, some protein and all those things. And one more thing could be some lipids. Look, the cheese, some fats there and all that stuff. So you can see your food is made up of like many, 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 many things. That's very important. The big things, all foods are made up of these 3 things. So for example, when I say this fish, even though it's in a protein category, it is not only made of protein, it's made up of all of these things. So when someone says don't eat so much bread because there's it's a carbohydrate, they don't mean that it's only made of carbs. They mean carbohydrates is the main thing of the bread. And that's exactly what it is. So these categories, when I put them here, this doesn't mean that this is purely made of carbs. What I mean is that carbs is the main constituent, the main ingredient of these foods. And when I say this is a protein, I mean the main thing is protein. But there's still in this fish, there's still carbs and there's still fats and things like that. But the main thing is proteins. Okay. So try and understand this. When I've grouped this into these 3 things, I don't mean it's only made up of that specific thing. Okay. It's made up of all of it, but the main ingredient will be, in this case, fats, and in this case, proteins, and in this case, carbs, okay? In our case, the pizza is made up of all 3 things clearly. It's easy to see. But if I use bread, you might have been a bit confused. But, so just bear in mind, this pizza is made up of the 3 main ingredients in all foods, okay? Now let's follow what happens. So, the second you put this pizza into your mouth, what's the first thing you always do? The first thing I would do is chew, because imagine trying to swallow this entire pizza down this thin pipe. That would never happen. So it's super important that you brush your teeth, so you still have teeth to chew this pizza. And what will happen is when you chew it, it will just get broken down. So maybe our pizza starts off like this, and if you chew it a bit, it becomes a bit smaller pieces, and then a bit smaller until you're able to actually swallow it, okay? And then once you swallow it, it's going to go into your esophagus, right? Okay, but it's not exactly that easy. Chewing is not the only thing that happens in your mouth. There's a reason why I made this one yellow, salivary gland, because we're going to talk about this one now in some detail, because this one is even more important than chewing. So when you chew your food, you break them down into small pieces. But what is the purpose then of your salivary gland? What is this one going to do? All these glands, how do they aid in digestion? So let's get down to it. So this might seem complicated, but if you just follow me, it will all make sense. So let's start off on the left side. Don't ignore this stuff right here for now. We're going to get to it and it'll all make sense. So the source is, one source in your mouth is called a salivary gland. A source just means where stuff comes from. So your salivary gland is going to release some important things, okay? So it's a source. Now, what does it release? In your mouth right now, you can probably feel a bit of wetness. It's the saliva, right? You have saliva in your mouth, right? Now, exactly. Your saliva comes from your salivary gland. That makes sense, right? Salivary, saliva. So this gland up here, these 3 glands release saliva into your mouth. Have you ever thought about what the purpose of that is? Why is your mouth wet consistently? Why are you able to spit, right? Why do you have this saliva in your mouth? What's the real purpose? Now, there's a big purpose. So in your saliva, so in this wetness in your mouth, there's something important called salivary amylase. Salivary amylase. Don't get confused by this word, okay? It's just a word. And salivary amylase is a type of enzyme. This might be another word that you're not sure about, but in a nutshell, An enzyme is a molecule that breaks things down. It's a molecule that speeds up a reaction. Okay, that's all it is. An enzyme just breaks stuff down. It speeds up the reaction. Because without enzymes, your food would take years to digest, years to get broken down. So enzymes are super important because they're like little molecules that help break down your food very, very fast. Very, very fast. So that's what enzymes do. Now, specifically in your spit or in your saliva, there is this specific type of enzyme called salivary amylase. And it kind of makes sense because salivary means saliva, and amylase is, so salivary amylase is the type of enzyme in your saliva, okay? And an easy way, so a good tip that I can give you is that most enzymes, 99% of enzymes, the name will end in ACE, A-S-E. So every time you see like a word ending in ACE, you know it's an enzyme. And then immediately you should know this thing breaks down food or breaks down anything in nature. Now, and another important thing is most enzymes only work in specific conditions. This is super important. Why do you think your body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, and if it goes above that, you get sick, or if it goes below that, you're also sick, and if it goes too high, you'll die? Now, what is the reason why your body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius? The reason is because your enzymes only work well at this temperature. That's why when you get sick, you start looking like crap and you don't function properly. And that's because your enzymes don't work anymore. They're struggling to function properly. So until you recover, your enzymes will then work better. So the problem is, if your temperature is too high, your enzymes are not going to work properly and you're going to feel like crap and look like crap, right? That's the point. So temperature is super important for the function of your enzymes. And one other thing that's important is pH. pH is basically, pH 7, for example, is neutral. So it's like water. And that makes sense because if you put your hand into your mouth where your saliva is, your hand won't burn off, right? And that's because the pH is neutral. Nothing can happen. So this specific enzyme called salivary amylase needs these two conditions to function properly. 37 degrees Celsius, or normal body temperature, and pH 7. If any of these two conditions don't work properly or are not right, then your enzymes, this enzyme won't work properly. Other enzymes have different conditions, but all enzymes need 37 degrees Celsius. Other enzymes may have a different pH that they like, but all enzymes like this temperature, okay? So let's move a bit forward. Now this enzyme in your saliva, okay, this molecule that is going to break down food, is also specific. And what that means is it only breaks down one specific thing. So this enzyme can't go and break down all your food, okay? It's only made for one specific enzyme. For one specific food. So when you look at these three substrates, so a substrate is basically, in this case, a type of food, okay? So it's something that's going to interact with the enzyme. That's what a substrate is. A substrate is anything that's going to interact with the enzyme. Now, which substrate here do you think will interact with salivary amylase? I would say not this circle, because that doesn't look like it's going to work. And I would say not this one, because I don't know how that's going to fit. But I would say this one. See, that might fit in pretty nice. Just like in this image. Now, this is exactly what I mean by that the enzymes are specific. They only interact with specific molecules. So this pizza that we just ate, that we just put in our mouth, this salivary, your saliva with this enzyme called salivary amylase will interact with your food, specifically the carbs. So this enzyme specifically interacts with just the carbs. It won't interact with anything else. So your proteins and your fats will still remain unbroken down. They won't be digested. But your carbohydrates will begin to be digested. So if you think about the pizza, it might be like the crust and some other things inside that will start being broken down by this enzyme. So here we go. So this starch or this carbohydrate in your pizza or your burger, whatever it is, will go bind with these enzymes. And what will happen is this enzyme, like I said, is important for breaking things down. So it will take this carbohydrate and break it down into smaller pieces that your teeth can't do. Because right, your teeth breaks the food down into big pieces, but your teeth can't break it down into pieces you can't see. Can't break it down because it's too big. Your teeth are too big. So these enzymes are going to break the food down that your teeth can't break down anymore. And it's going to take specifically only the carbohydrates and break them down into something called the products. So in this case, the starch or the carbohydrate will be broken down into maltose, as you can see here. Maltose. So maltose is a smaller version of carbohydrate. It's a version that's broken down. And then obviously as well, the product will be the enzyme itself. So it's important to know when the enzyme interacts with a substrate, the enzyme is never affected. It will always remain the exact same it was before. Only the substrate is changed. The enzyme itself will remain 100% fine. So that's why the products include the enzyme and the actual product, which was broken down from the substrate. So that is, to be honest, that's it that happens in your mouth. So just know that in your mouth, the food that you put in will be broken down into smaller pieces by your teeth. And when they get too small to be broken down by your teeth, those things will be broken down by your salivary gland, releasing saliva. Inside the saliva, we have this enzyme called Salivary Amylase, and it will react with all the carbohydrate portions of your food. So no proteins, no fats. The proteins and fats are still not going to be broken down, but the carbohydrate portions of your pizza will be broken down into something called maltose. So the carbohydrates were now broken down into maltose. Okay, so that's what's going on here now. And the step after this is going to be your food kind of traveling down your esophagus. And that's what we'll talk about in the next video, along with what happens in the stomach. Okay, so I hope this is starting to make sense. We're gonna slowly over the next few parts finish what happened to this pizza. Just for now, know what happened in the mouth, because the mouth is, in my opinion, one of the most complicated parts.